All right, so let's be real here. So most people have put like 2 or 3 new game pluses in, probably hundreds of hours into this game by now. It's been out for a year. If you haven't done any of that by now, that's cool. Then hopefully you're around the mid game to the end game area, in which case the build I'm getting ready to share with you is definitely for you. Let's talk about it. Okay, so this is going to be a complete Elden Ring Lightning Spear build for PvE specifically. If you want to do PvP, I wouldn't recommend doing this. Obviously, if you've been playing this game for a long time, you probably know about a lot of this build anyway, but if not, this might be a little something fun to try. So everything I'm going to cover here is pretty much everything you need to know for a mid to late game run. And by the way, this guide is pretty much up to date for patch 1.10. Just to clear it up, everybody know that up front, because my last video for New Game Plus, I had people blowing up the comments section for months and months about how certain things didn't apply anymore. Hey, this thing carries over now. So I'm letting everybody know right now that as of patch 1.10, we know that's where all this information that is at its most accurate. So there you go. And we're going to be covering recommended melee weapons, talismans, physic mixtures, armor, stats, and incantations, as well as where you might even need to go to find some of this stuff. So let's just jump into it. And to keep this video from being like 40 minutes long, I'm going to break this video into 2 parts. That way you can come back here for one section, and then the next one will go into detail about some of the later stuff, just because what I'm going to cover is pretty in depth. So the core of this build is the Bolt of Gransack Spear and a Great Shield with some AoE supplemented lightning incantations. The goal here is to focus primarily on improving dexterity while obtaining enough strength and faith to wield everything you're going to use. And like I said at the top of this video, all these recommendations are likely for mid to late game on your first playthrough, and that's mainly because you're likely only going to have enough stats to upgrade either your Great Shield or lightning incantations. But in New Game Plus, you will definitely have enough for both, at least over time you will. Oops, being summoned into a world. 1 second. All right, let's see what we got. You never know what you're going to get. Oh. Whew. Why can't it always be this easy? Anyway, and let me tell you what makes the Lightning Spear really unique really quick. So there aren't really a lot of lightning weapons in the game, and only a few Ashes of War actually provide lightning skills. So this build is really versatile. It offers a ton of survivability. You'll be able to take out singular enemies with a spear, larger groups with incantations, and you're doing all that behind the safety of range or even behind a Great Shield. So the Bolt of Gransack is really where you're doing most of your damage output, and for support with critical hits, you're going to be using the, and I'm so sorry if I'm butchering this, the Misericord? What the f? I have no idea. Let's just call it the Misericord. Someone in the comments is probably going to correct me, and I'll be glad to hear it. So the Bolt of Gransack is a spear that deals about 1/3 of its damage as lightning, and the rest is physical damage. And that comes in as piercing damage, by the way. It's got a powerful, unique skill called the Ancient Lightning Spear, so you can't have the affinity altered or buffed by grease or a spell. It is lightning always and forever. And I should mention that spears have a more specialized weapon type than most of the other weapons. They have more consequential benefits and drawbacks. For example, you can hold up a shield, hold up your spear, and you can poke and prod anything that gets in front of you, and you'll kill it safely without taking any damage, or as little damage as possible. And that's really important in some of the late game areas when you're doing a lot of one-on-one fights and everybody's doing a crap ton of damage. But in exchange though, you're not hitting multiple enemies at once. Every fight's a one-on-one. There's not a lot of opportunities for crowd control here, and that's where the lightning spells are going to come into play, or the incantations. Unless you're fighting these dudes, then for real, don't listen to nothing I'm saying, because it won't matter. I mean, for real, look at all those buffs at the top. Ridiculous. Now, the Ancient Lightning Spear weapon skill, it's ridiculously strong, and it can pretty much one-shot most enemies, and even some of the stronger ones like the Knights. It also has super long range, and it travels super fast, and most enemies can't even really dodge it. Because of that, when they get hit, they're going straight to the ground, and that leaves them open for a follow-up strike if you want to. Not really my thing though. I don't really like to spam it, although it's really satisfying to hit them and watch them go to the ground. So, you know, your playstyle comes into play here. But you're only hitting one target at a time, and it takes forever to wind up the attack, and it's expensive to use, so you're not spamming this thing. And it's not going to break anybody's guard either. No big deal though, because 3 strikes from the heavy attack will take care of that with no problem. Just make sure you watch where you're going. And the guard counter is similar in potential. You definitely want to be using the strong attack when you can for that extra damage though. And that extra stamina drain is worth it, but you are relying more on the critical hit for the damage, since the actual charge attack doesn't really do that much more than a regular hit, which is kind of surprising. Now, if you haven't picked this up, the Bolt of Gransack can be picked up from the larger version that's been plunged into a building in Lindell, the royal capital. once you have the Rune of Death, you can't get this thing. So make sure you get this before you go down that path and get the Rune of Death if you're into that. But let's talk about the next one, the Misericord. Again, I know I'm probably saying this wrong. I am probably butchering it. Somebody hook me up and tell me the right way to say it in the comics. Anyway, now I only recommend using the Misericord with the lightning affinity, and this is really just to deal more damage with the critical hits. Backstabs and front stabs against guard broken enemies, of course. The Misericord deals the most critical damage out of any of the weapons. So you see 140 damage here, but that's not actually 140% more damage. Really what this is telling you is that it does 4 to 5 times more damage with backstabs and normal critical hits. I mean, the kind of damage we're talking about here, it really rivals the in-game colossal weapons that you'll get. Basically, many of the heavier hitting weapons, colossal weapons included, and this is basically because they all lack critical damage, so they have to make up for it with more base damage. But when it's imbued with lightning affinity, it has similar scaling and synergy to the bolt of Grand Sax and really the rest of your build. But don't lean too heavily on that. Critical hits are only a small part of the overall build, so this is by no means required. And it can be looted off a corpse in the armory room with 2 exiled in Stormvale Castle. And you can pick this up pretty early on, so you probably picked it up way early on and had no idea what you threw in your book bag and just kept it moving. I know I did. As a matter of fact, I don't even remember actually picking it up when I did, but as soon as I looked at the stats that one time, I moved on. All right, so let's talk about the left hand armaments real quick. Well, not really quick at all. Let's get elaborate. So for the left hand, you're using a Great Shield and a Sacred Seal. Sacred Seals is primarily so that you can use lightning incantations, so you can get those area of effects. Now again, like I said earlier, if this is your first playthrough, you're gonna have to make some sacrifices in order to use one of these and get the most out of it. Basically what I'm saying is, if you want to use the strongest lightning incantations, you might have to sacrifice using some of the most reliable Great Shields, but in New Game Plus, these are likely not going to be an issue. You'll be well prepared to use both. And you'll likely have the FP to cast as much as your playstyle desires. Now I recommend using Great Shields primarily because they offer the highest guard boost stats. If you don't know, guard boost is a multiplier that reduces the stamina that you drain by blocking an attack. So the higher your guard boost, the less stamina it's going to cost you to block an attack, meaning you can block more damage before running out of stamina and block heavier hits without having your guard broken. But of course, if you dodge roll like a brick, then that shield ain't going to save you from too much. Why do y'all even exist? But Great Shields, they have higher strength requirements and you can't parry with them, so they aren't necessarily worth using unless you gain some other benefit. Now if you're carrying a spear, you're getting somewhere. As it turns out, the higher guard boost stat is valuable because you're using a spear as your main weapon. You can poke with thrusting weapons, including spears, while you got your shield raised, allowing you to attack and block at the same time. But the trade-off here is you're not dealing as much damage because your poke speed is super slow and each hit is a bit weaker than that of a regular attack. Not to mention you'll also be draining stamina faster because you'll be spending more on defense and offense at the same time. So I only recommend doing this if you're uncertain if you're gonna get hit while you're attacking. So here's my rationale on using Great Shields. 100% physical damage negation, capability to have no skill equip. And it's cool, some won't agree with this one. I just like having my right-handed weapon skill ready to go. It just suits my playstyle. Your mileage may vary. And one more thing, it's a personal preference. I just like the gold color. There's a lot of gold shields. I like that. You better not be judging me. So what is a good Great Shield to start using? Well, for me, I'm recommending the Golden Beast Crest Shield. It's got one of the lowest strength requirements for a shield that has 100% physical damage negation. And its gold color matches armors super well. And like I said, I like gold. Again, don't judge me. I feel like you're judging me. Are you judging me? Look, there's nothing wrong with Fashion Souls or Fashion Elden Ring, whatever they want to call it. Now, assuming you got the skills to beat the boss who's got this on your first playthrough, I wasn't one of those people, but if you were, it's available pretty early into the game too, so you're going to be using it regardless of which specialization you choose for at least some portion of the game. I mean, if you choose to upgrade your faith to boost the power of your lightning incantations, you're gonna be using the Golden Beast Crest Shield for probably the remainder of the game if you really get into it and you like it. But the Golden Beast Crest Shield drops from defeating the Graft of Scion, and he probably dunked on you at the Chapel of Anticipation at the very beginning of the game. You gotta go back and fight him to get this. And honestly, I didn't even know that was something you could even do until basically the end of my playthrough, so go back and get that as soon as you can. Oh yeah, and he also drops the Ornamental Straight Sword, so there you go. Now, if you want something better than this, the Golden Great Shield is substantially better than the Golden Beast Crest Shield in pretty much every way. But the only catch is it does cost 10 more strength to use. So you got to think about that as well. If you don't have a a build that's prepared for that. Now the main benefit to this shield is it has considerably higher guard boost stat. Now it might not look like it on paper, but you can easily feel the difference. And holy and lightning mitigation are also a lot stronger here, which is incredibly valuable for most of the late game. I'm looking at you, Halo Tree. Thank God that's optional. Now if you want the golden grace shield, it's got a chance to wait. Dang, it didn't hit anybody. Anyway, now if you want the golden grace shield, it's got a chance to drop from the Lindell Knights that wield it. You'll see them patrolling around the Atlas Plateau. Some of them are more common the closer you get to Lindell, the world capital. Alright, so let's wrap this section up with Sacred Seals. Now, Sacred Seals, in case you don't know, they're items that enable you to cast incantations. All of them scale strongly with faith, and most of them boost a specific category of incantations. Now I'm going to outline two that I recommend here, and we're going to start with the Claw Mark Seal. The Claw Mark Seal has a unique trait that it scales with faith and strength, though the faith scaling is a little weaker than most of the other options, but it's the best option for your first playthrough because you need to take a fair bit of both stats for other parts of the build. It also boosts bestial incantations given to you by Garank, though they're not really a part of this build. So the Claw Mark Seal will be given to you by Garank, Beast Clergyman, after feeding him the Death Root for the first time, and you get Death Roots by feeding the Tibian Mariners, and they're usually found in some of the catacombs. Now if you don't want to use that, you also have the Gravelstone Seal, and that scales exclusively with faith, and it boosts effectiveness of the Dragon Cult incantations, including the lightning incantations you're going to be using, by about 15%, but this boost isn't always sufficient to compensate for the single stat scaling compared to the Claw Mark Seal. Now, only use the Gravelstone Seal with this build when you see its incantation scaling surpass 208, which, as you can see here, I'm clearly nowhere near it. Honestly, it's likely not going to happen in your first playthrough unless you really allocate a lot of stats to faith instead of strength. So this is a New Game Plus option. And by the way, if you haven't picked up the Gravelstone Seal, it's dropped by defeating one of the two knights in the Lindell area. Now, I don't know which one it is because on one playthrough for me, the guy with the great bow dropped it, but on another playthrough, the guy with the spear had it. So one of those two dudes carries it. And if you've already been to Lindell and unlocked this area, just go to the West Capitol Rampart, and right from that spot, you'll cut a left as soon as you leave the Grace and hop down the window, and they should be over to your right. So take them out, and there you go. But like I said, that's how we're going to wrap up this video this time. Next video, we're going to cover incantations, the Wondrous Physics mix, armor sets, talismans, and maybe a stat target and some flask allocations so you can get the most out of this build. But now I want to hear from you guys. Do you guys use the Bolt of Grand Sacks? Do you guys even play with incantations? Do you like the dragon incantations? How do you feel about lightning? Am I hyping this up or is it overrated? Tell me any and everything in the comments below. And if you made it this far to the end of the video, thank you so much. I love you more than you can possibly know. And make sure to drop a like because that lets me know if this was of any value to you and whether I should keep making more things like this. Oh, and by the way, to any of you random folks out there who've been dropping compliments in the comments about my voice, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. That wasn't the intention, but I just want you guys to know I'm doing this for you guys specifically. I'll catch you guys in the next one.